So a conservative Lord, Lord Frost, has said something pretty interesting that I thought we should talk about. Obviously, that the Sue Gray report is due to come out in some capacity about all the different parties that were going on at Number 10 Downing Street, and various other places involved with high level government officials. That's all very dodgy, but it's actually created this real demand, apparently, from the Tory leadership to get rid of a lot of the staff, because it's their fault, I guess, that Boris Johnson and the cabinet were all trying to have a nice boozy party while the rest of the country was in lockdown and people weren't seeing their dying relatives and obeying the rules. And students were getting fined like 10 grand for having a little party. So, because obviously that's happening, that means that Lord Frost is very interested in the kind of people that are going to be now employed and the kind of people that are going to be kind of sacked, that are going to be kicked out. And Lord Frost used to work as a Brexit minister, I believe, and he said that Number 10 needs to sack, quote, woke crowd and, quote, neo-socialists. He also said they need to get rid of the green fanatics as well. So let's talk about that. First off, woke is a really interesting insult, because technically I'm pretty sure woke just means kind of well informed and clued in when it comes to important social and cultural injustices and issues. I think that's all it really means. It's obviously not an insult, but he's using it, I assume, to mean people who love cancel culture and are these loony lefty progressives, whereas that's the opposite of kind of what he thinks is the right sort of cultural and social attitude to have. But I mean, that's interesting, because obviously that's not true, because we have a government that has been very, very poor when it comes to issues like racism in our country. Their response to the Black Lives Matter movement was very poor. They basically, they've launched report after report, and they've launched investigation after investigation into systemic racism and stuff, and either it's come out that actually no, we're brilliant, which is contrary to all of the academic data, or said actually yes, there is a problem. But then at that point, that cultural moment has moved on and the news doesn't care anymore. Obviously the injustices are still there, but the media isn't reporting on it as much, so there's a lot less pressure on them to do something. So now that the report's done, and they said they were going to do the report and then act on the report, they don't have to actually do anything, which is great. So, that's the case. And then this is a government that is very, very, very hostile towards refugees and asylum seekers. So that's not very woke, is it? They're also not socially very progressive on trans issues at all. So either these people are sort of in and around Number 10, they do work with cabinet ministers, they are working closely with Boris Johnson, and they're having basically zero impact on policy, because the government is clearly not a socially progressive one. Priti Patel obviously called kneeling players who are kneeling football players who are kneeling in support of Black Lives Matter, she's called that gesture politics, and all this stuff. So either they're not having an impact and they are there, or they're just not there, right? Either way, it's a non-issue, right? And again, obviously, it's clearly the fault of many, many, many people. It's an endemic corruption and feeling of being able to take airs and graces, and like the rule of law doesn't apply to them. That's kind of baked into the cake of how the British government works at the moment and how the Conservative Party operates. But what's even more interesting is green fanatics. I don't know what he's talking about there, because yes, our government has pursued some pro-environment policies. They have invested a little bit into renewable energies and a little bit into certain projects that make a little bit of a difference. when it comes to fighting climate change and stopping the possible extinction of all of life on Earth. But they haven't done an awful lot of it. And again, the government, I mean, we hosted COP26 in Glasgow, and, you know, Boris Johnson went there and he talked the talk, but there was very little substance there. We're not on track to meet our Paris Climate Accord targets of net zero carbon emissions by 2050, and even so, that isn't good enough anyway. Really, we should be aiming for 2030, which would have been a lot easier if fossil fuel companies hadn't constantly lobbied and pushed out, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of misinformation in the 80s and 90s when the science first started to kind of come about that actually, yeah, this is causing a lot of damage. But anyway, look, the point is, the government is not doing nearly enough. Alok Sharma, the government's sort of climate minister, I think, or minister for climate change, he said something about how, you know, we're teetering on a knife edge, you know, it's the last chance. I can't remember his exact words, but it was something like, you know, this is our kind of, you know, our last chance to really make real change. Just as the government then allowed oil and gas fields to go ahead. How is these green fanatics, how are they actually, what impact are they really having here? And even if they were having an impact, that's a good thing. Not only are fossil fuels horrendous for the climate, not only are they causing global warming, which is causing more and more catastrophic weather events to happen, which is destroying ecosystems, which is causing biodiversity to collapse. Not only are they horrible in that way, they're also very, very finite, and nowadays, we're not even creating many good jobs in our country from those industries, so it makes way more sense to go into renewable energy and actually make Britain a world leader in green industries and get a lot of good green jobs going. So it's just profoundly stupid anyway. And then, of course, there's the neo-socialist remark. Now, obviously neo means like new or whatever. But I can guarantee if you asked Lord Frost what socialism meant, I can guarantee he would not actually be able to tell you. And I think that's the case with most conservatives, unfortunately. They'd say, you know, it's that meme, isn't it? Socialism is when the government does stuff, and communism is when the government does a whole lot of stuff. You know, it's ridiculous. They're seriously saying there are socialists working with Boris Johnson, and like staff in Downing Street, and presumably working for other cabinet ministers, are neo-socialists. If there were socialists in government making a genuine impact, you can guarantee that national insurance contributions would not be increasing, and that there would be a wealth tax on the massive profit gains that were made by billionaires and giant corporations during the pandemic in order to pay for, you know, various jobs programs, investing more in the NHS, investing more in education, investing more in infrastructure, stuff like that. You can absolutely guarantee it. Also, we wouldn't be having the same problems with bills increasing, with energy and things, because we'd have, again, those actual green fanatics would be there, so we'd be a lot more self-reliant, and we'd have a lot more solar energy being produced in the country, more wind and geothermal and stuff like that, and probably nuclear. Clearly has no idea what he's talking about, right? No idea. I presume when he's saying neo-socialist, he's talking about like how, oh yeah, the government has like spent loads of money in the pandemic. But what? The US government, which was run by fucking Republicans, by Donald Trump, the man who's basically a neo-fascist, they pumped like, what was it, like $2-3 trillion into the stock market, like that. They just conjured that money up out of thin air, right? Because that's how governments that have control over their central bank, that's how governments have control over the production of their currency, can do finances, right? So it doesn't make you a socialist to want to spend money on stuff. Socialism, I'm going to spell it out for you, Lord Frost. Socialism is when the workers own the means of production, whether that is through the democratic public ownership of essential utilities, in the way that Labour under Jeremy Corbyn wanted to do with the railways and water companies, energy companies and Royal Mail, or as worker-owned companies, cooperatives, in a sort of market environment. Right? That's what it is. I can guarantee not a single person with any degree of influence in the British government right now thinks that any of that is a good idea. None of them. And if they did, they would have been kicked out a hell of a long time ago. So yeah, it's just profoundly stupid. I really don't want to know what else to say. He's just an idiot. But, you know, maybe there are lots of leftists and, you know, eco-warriors and the woke brigade in this Conservative government that we have that have done absolutely nothing to warrant believing that for the past 14 years. Who knows? I'm interested in your thoughts about why you think Lord Frost was saying this. I assume it's just because he wants the government to become even more right-wing. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. I'm always interested to read them. As always, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.